The most important force that can transform your life. A CEO loses everything: her company, her fortune, her reputation, in a single devastating week. 5 years later, she's worth 10 times what she lost, happier than she's ever been, and credits her transformation as something that cost her absolutely nothing. A veteran returns from deployment unable to walk, told he'll never regain full mobility. Today, he runs ultramarathons. A single mother working 3 jobs to support her children somehow finds a way to launch a successful business while her children sleep. What invisible force connected all three of these people? What transformed their circumstances so dramatically? The answer isn't what you'd expect. It's not money, luck, connections, or talent. It's not a secret technique known only to the wealthy or powerful. It's something far more powerful, something you already possess, but may have never learned to harness properly. This force has transformed the lives of prisoners, millionaires, students, retirees, the healthy, and the chronically ill. It works regardless of your starting point, your past failures, or your current circumstances. The beginning of understanding. Sarah Chin stood in her empty corner office on the 47th floor, staring at the Manhattan skyline one last time. The moving boxes were gone. The awards had been packed away. In 72 hours, her tech company had imploded after a catastrophic data breach exposed customer information, triggering lawsuits, regulatory fines, and a complete loss of investor confidence. She'd lost her company, her life savings, and her professional reputation in less than a week. The media had been ruthless. Former friends stopped returning calls. Investors who'd once praised her vision now publicly criticized her leadership. At 39 years old, Sarah felt like her life was over. That night, sitting alone in her apartment surrounded by half-packed boxes, Sarah did something unexpected. Instead of dwelling on what she'd lost, she pulled out a journal and wrote a single question: what can I control right now? The list was shorter than she'd hoped. She couldn't control the lawsuits, public opinion, or media narratives. She couldn't control her former investors' anger or her employees' disappointment. She couldn't erase the data breach or undo the decisions that led to it. But she could control her next action. She could control what she learned from this catastrophic experience. She could control whether she got out of bed tomorrow. She could control her response to this crisis. She could control whether she gave up or kept going. This simple act of focusing on what she could control rather than what she couldn't became the turning point that transformed Sarah's entire life. Within 5 years, she'd founded a cybersecurity company that became an industry leader, worth significantly more than her original business. But more importantly, she discovered the most powerful force available to human beings: the force of personal agency. Understanding the force. Personal agency is the belief and practice of recognizing what you can influence and acting on it, while releasing what you cannot. It sounds almost too simple to be transformative, yet represents the single most powerful force for change in human psychology. Dr. Marcus Thompson, who spent 15 years researching resilience at a leading university, discovered something remarkable. When tracking thousands of individuals facing significant challenges, job loss, health crises, relationship breakdowns, financial disasters, the factor that most predicted who would recover and thrive wasn't intelligence, wealth, social support, or even the severity of their crisis. It was their sense of personal agency, their belief that their actions mattered, and their willingness to take those actions consistently. The research revealed something surprising. People with high personal agency didn't necessarily face fewer challenges or have better starting circumstances. Many had experienced significant trauma, poverty, or disadvantage. What distinguished them was their consistent focus on what lay within their control, no matter how small those elements might be. Consider James Rodriguez, the veteran mentioned earlier. After an IED explosion in Afghanistan left him with severe leg injuries, doctors told him he'd achieved maximum recovery. He could walk with a cane, but running would never be possible. For 6 months, James accepted this reality, growing increasingly depressed. Then something shifted. James started asking different questions. Not why did this happen to me, but what can I do today? Not what have I lost, but what can I build? He couldn't change what happened in Afghanistan. He couldn't magically heal his damaged nerves. But he could control his physical therapy routine. He could control his diet. He could control his mindset during rehabilitation. He could control whether he showed up every single day to do the work, even when progress seemed impossible. James began with 30 seconds of supported standing, then 1 minute, then 5. Each day, he focused solely on what he could control that day, not the ultimate goal of running, just the next small action. 18 months later, he completed his first 5K. 3 years after that, his first ultramarathon. 5 years later, he'd completed races on 6 continents. The science behind the force. Neuroscientists have discovered that our brains are remarkably responsive to our sense of agency. When we believe our actions matter and we act on that belief, our brains release dopamine, strengthen neural pathways associated with motivation and resilience, and actually rewire themselves to become more solution-oriented. Conversely, when we focus primarily on what we cannot control, other people's opinions, past events, external circumstances, our brains activate stress responses that impair decision-making, reduce motivation, and create a sense of helplessness that becomes self-reinforcing. This isn't just theory. Brain imaging studies show that people with high personal agency demonstrate greater activity in the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for planning, decision-making, and emotional regulation. Their brains literally function differently when facing challenges. Dr. Lisa Patel, a neuropsychologist, conducted a fascinating study with 2 groups facing similar stressors. One group received training focused on identifying what they could control and taking action in those areas. The other received general stress management advice. After 6 months, the agency-focused group showed measurably different brain activity patterns, reported significantly lower stress levels, and achieved better outcomes in their challenges. The trap of misplaced focus. Consider Maria Santos, a single mother working as a night shift nurse, a weekend retail clerk, and doing freelance bookkeeping whenever she could squeeze it in. She desperately wanted to provide better opportunities for her 2 children, but every day felt like drowning in obligations and exhaustion. Maria spent her limited free time worrying about what she couldn't change: the high cost of living in her city, her ex-husband's failure to pay child support, her lack of a college degree, her children's school system's limitations. These worries were valid, but focusing on them left her feeling powerless and paralyzed. Then Maria's sister introduced her to a simple practice: spending 10 minutes each morning writing down 3 things she could actually control that day. Not big things, just actionable items within her power. The first day, her list included, I can drink more water today. I can listen fully when my son tells me about school. I can spend 15 minutes researching free online business courses. That third item changed everything. Maria couldn't afford business school, but she could control 15 minutes. She found free courses in accounting software, then bookkeeping, then small business management. During her children's bedtimes, she studied. During her lunch breaks, she practiced. Every action was small, but each was something she controlled completely. 2 years later, Maria launched her own bookkeeping service, working from home. For years after that, she employed 6 people and earned more than all 3 of her previous jobs combined. She hadn't changed her circumstances through wishful thinking or by somehow resolving all the factors outside her control. She transformed her life by relentlessly focusing her energy on what she could actually influence. The relationship dimension. Personal agency transforms relationships in surprising ways. David and Jennifer Morrison had reached a breaking point in their marriage after 12 years together. They spent therapy sessions listing everything wrong with the other person, everything the other needed to change. The therapist finally interrupted. What if you each spent 1 month focused solely on what you can control, your own actions, responses, and choices, without trying to change the other person? The assignment felt pointless to both of them. The problem was the other person, after all, but they committed to trying. David couldn't control Jennifer's communication style, but he could control whether he put away his phone during dinner. He couldn't control her stress levels, but he could control whether he offered to handle the kids' bedtime routine twice a week. Jennifer couldn't control David's work schedule, but she could control whether she expressed appreciation for the things he did do. She couldn't control his emotional availability, but she could control her own reactions when disappointed. Something remarkable happened. As each person focused exclusively on their own agency, on what they could actually control, they stopped waiting for the other person to change first. The relationship didn't transform because they found some perfect compromise. It transformed because both people reclaimed their power to influence their shared life through their own choices. Within 6 months, they'd rebuilt what they thought was permanently broken, not through changing each other, but through exercising their individual agency within the relationship. The professional application. Robert Kamani worked in middle management at a company he felt was poorly run. Bad decisions came from above. Office politics undermined good work. Innovation was stifled. Robert spent 2 years bitter and frustrated, complaining to anyone who'd listen about everything wrong with the organization. Then he attended a leadership workshop where the facilitator asked, "What percentage of your work energy goes toward complaining about what you can't control versus acting on what you can?" Robert realized he'd spent perhaps 60% of his mental energy on frustration with unchangeable factors: corporate strategy, executive decisions, company culture, and only 40% on what he directly controlled. He decided to reverse that ratio. He couldn't control executive decisions, but he could control how he led his team. He couldn't control company culture, but he could control the culture within his department. He couldn't control corporate strategy, but he could control how he implemented it with creativity and care. Robert stopped attending complaint sessions with colleagues. He redirected that energy into making his department the best functioning unit in the company. He focused on developing his people, improving processes within his control, and delivering exceptional results in his domain. Within 18 months, Robert was promoted twice. Not because the company magically improved, but because he demonstrated what happens when someone focuses their full energy on what they can actually influence. Eventually, he moved to a company that better matched his values, but he left with a powerful promotion, excellent references, and proven leadership skills, all because he reclaimed his agency. The health crisis application. When Patricia Wong received her cancer diagnosis at 42, she felt her life spiral out of control. She couldn't control the disease. She couldn't control the grueling treatment protocols. She couldn't control the side effects that made her feel like a stranger in her own body. Her oncologist, Dr. Reeves, noticed Patricia becoming increasingly passive and dependent, a pattern he'd seen countless times. "You're facing something terrifying," he told her, "and there's much you can't control. But there's also much you can. Would you be willing to identify those things?" Together, they made a list. Patricia couldn't control having cancer, but she could control researching her specific diagnosis thoroughly. She couldn't control the treatment plan, but she could control whether she asked questions until she fully understood it. She couldn't control the side effects, but she could control her nutrition, sleep habits, and whether she practiced recommended stress reduction techniques. She couldn't control the outcome, but she could control showing up for her treatment with the best possible physical and mental preparation. Patricia became an active participant in her treatment rather than a passive recipient. She tracked her symptoms meticulously. She advocated for herself with medical staff. She built routines around what she could control: meditation, gentle movement, connection with loved ones, purposeful rest. The cancer eventually went into remission, but Patricia's transformation went deeper. She'd faced something genuinely outside her control and discovered that even in the midst of that, enormous agency remained. That discovery changed how she approached every subsequent challenge. The daily practice. The most successful practitioners of personal agency treat it as a daily practice, not a one-time insight. They've developed rituals around identifying and acting on what they can control. Many start each day by writing 3 specific actions within their control that day. Not vague intentions like be more positive, but concrete actions. I will take a 20-minute walk at lunch. I will prepare tomorrow's meals tonight. I will spend 15 minutes reviewing my financial goals. Others do a weekly review, asking, where did I waste energy on things outside my control this week? Where did I exercise strong agency? What will I do differently next week? Some use a simple decision filter when facing any challenge. Can I influence this? If yes, what's my next action? If no, can I influence my response to it? The key is consistency. Personal agency isn't about one heroic decision. It's about thousands of small choices to focus on what you can control rather than what you can't. The transformation mechanism. Why is personal agency so transformative? Because it breaks the cycle of helplessness that keeps people stuck. When we focus on what we cannot control, we feel helpless. Helplessness leads to inaction. Inaction reinforces the sense of helplessness. We spiral downward, accumulating evidence that we're powerless. When we focus on what we can control and act on it, we feel capable. That capability leads to more action. Action produces results, even small ones. Results reinforce our sense of agency. We spiral upward, accumulating evidence that our choices matter. This isn't positive thinking or ignoring reality. It's the opposite. It's radically accepting reality while recognizing that even within constraints, agency exists. Sarah Chun couldn't control the data breach that destroyed her first company, but she controlled what she learned from it, making her second company more secure. James Rodriguez couldn't control his war injuries, but he controlled his rehabilitation approach. Maria Santos couldn't control her circumstances, but she controlled her response. David and Jennifer couldn't control each other, but they controlled themselves. Robert couldn't control his company, but he controlled his leadership. Patricia couldn't control cancer, but she controlled her participation in treatment. The paradox of control. Here's the paradox. The more you try to control what's outside your control, the less control you actually have. The more you focus on controlling only what's within your control, the more influence you develop. When you try to control other people, they resist. When you focus on controlling your own behavior, others often respond positively. When you try to control outcomes, you create anxiety. When you focus on controlling your effort and approach, you create possibilities. When you try to control circumstances, you feel victimized. When you focus on controlling your response, you feel empowered. This is why personal agency is the most important force for transformation. It works with reality rather than against it. It acknowledges limitations while maximizing freedom within those limitations. The ultimate truth. Here's what connects every transformation story. The force that changed everything wasn't external. It was the decision to stop waiting for circumstances to improve and start improving what lay within their control. This force, personal agency, transforms lives not through magic, but through a fundamental shift in how we relate to our challenges. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" we ask, "What can I do about this?" Instead of cataloging everything wrong that we can't fix, we identify the one thing, right, that we can influence. The most important force that can transform your life isn't more money, better luck, different circumstances, or other people changing. It's recognizing the power you already possess and using it every single day in every situation you face. You cannot control most of what happens to you, but you can control what you do about it. And that ultimately makes all the difference. Your next action. If you're reading this and wondering where to start, there's only one question that matters. What can you control right now? Not tomorrow, not after circumstances improve, not when you have more resources or better conditions. Right now, in this moment, what is one thing within your power that you can act on? That's where transformation begins, not in grand gestures or perfect conditions, but in the simple, powerful decision to exercise the agency you possess today. The force that transformed Sarah, James, Maria, David, Jennifer, Robert, and Patricia's lives is the same force available to you. It's been there all along, waiting for you to recognize it and use it. What will you do with it?